This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing incredible films from around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/purekino. Since Hollywood is culturally, intellectually, and perhaps most of all, morally bankrupt, instead of coming up with original ideas, they usually prefer to adapt a popular novel for film. It makes sense. Existing IPs have a built-in audience that you can exploit for profit. But being limited to the constraints of the medium, the adaptations are almost universally inferior to the source material. They just don't have time in 2 hours to get across what a novel has in hundreds of pages. But what if the movie in question is regarded as a classic? Can a masterpiece in film actually be superior to the original novel? Let's take a look at one such example and find out. American Psycho. Regarded as a cult classic, American Psycho tells the story of Patrick Bateman, a wealthy yet emotionally disturbed investment banker living in New York during the debauched and cocaine-fueled 1980s. A member of New York's elite Yuppie society, Bateman obsesses over his appearance, his materialistic possessions, and his social standing among his friends whom he despises. But underneath this superficial mask, Bateman has homicidal tendencies that increasingly spill into his normal life. As he spirals into a drug and sex-fueled murder spree, Patrick desperately wants to be recognized as the serial killer he is. However, his world is too wrapped up in their own shallowness to even notice the serial killer in their presence. Before we get into the differences between book and film, let's talk about why both are so well regarded. Upon its publication, American Psycho was met with praise for its postmodern and transgressive qualities. The author, Brett Easton Ellis, uses the story of a serial killer to highlight the selfishness and empty materialism of the late 80s New York. In this world, only the surface matters. What you own, who you know, and most importantly, where you eat.
Where do we have reservations at? I mean, I'm not really hungry, but I'd like to have reservations someplace.
They are all just status symbols to be collected and used. Patrick is the ultimate representation of this mentality. He views everything, even people, as simply objects, which allows him to sadistically murder them without even the slightest hint of remorse. Bateman's Psychosis serves as a brutally honest light, shining down on consumerism. There's also a lot of humor to the fact that these yuppies are too wrapped up in their own shallowness to notice the serial killer amongst them. Characters are constantly being mistaken for each other, highlighting the fact that they are all essentially the same person. This allows Bateman's murders to go unnoticed, while his confessions are frequently ignored because no one ever listens to each other.
I'm into, murders and executions mostly.
Do you like it?
Well, it depends. Why?
Well, most guys I know who work in mergers and acquisitions really don't like it.
However, while the novel drew much praise for its themes, the book also generated a lot of controversy for its graphic violence and sexual content. The book is one of the most frequently banned and protested novels of the era. Funny anecdote, one of the people who protested this book was Gloria Steinem, a feminist journalist who opposed the novel's portrayal of violence against women. She talked Leonardo DiCaprio out of accepting the lead role, but funny enough, her stepson Christian Bale ended up portraying the very violence on the silver screen. That must have been some fun dinner conversation.
I'm, sorry, you're not terribly important to me.
The movie follows the plot of the book pretty accurately. Some scenes are rearranged in the film, but for the most part, everything you see happened in the novel. There are scenes that the film leaves out, of course, but we'll touch on those later. The biggest difference, of course, is the medium itself. The novel is written in first-person point of view, with all the events of the story being filtered through Patrick's twisted perspective. The camera, meanwhile, gives us an objective view of the situation and distances Bateman from the audience. This has a profound impact on how the story plays out. Now, I've heard some people say that the novel's build-up to the madness is slow and chaotic, while in the film it's fast and logical. They cite the fact that in the film, Patrick's first kill follows his humiliation with Paul Allen's business card, while in the novel it comes seemingly out of nowhere. While I agree the transition is faster in the film, that's only because the film doesn't have the time that the novel does. I also disagree with the idea that it's logical in the film. In both versions, we get hints that Patrick has been killing long before the story started. He threatens the bartender at Tunnel, and he tries to get the blood out of his sheets at the Chinese laundry. And this is all before he kills the bum. No, the biggest change from page to film is how he's perceived by the audience. The fact that we see Patrick's thoughts in the novel gives us an insight into him that the film audience does not get. Movie watchers get this cool, stoic business mogul and serial killer. Though he endures some slight humiliations like the business card scene, and when he tries to get a reservation at Dorsia, they seem to roll off of him because we aren't inside of his head. However, the book gives us a deeper perspective on Patrick. We actually get the sense that he's kind of a loser, even in his own world. His friends make fun of him as the boring boy next door, he's constantly disappointing the women he sleeps with, and while the movie makes it seem like his obsession with serial killers goes unnoticed, his friends are actually super put off by the habit. There's a scene where he goes to a club that's playing hip-hop and is filled with people who are not a part of his yuppie social circle, and he absolutely humiliates himself trying to pick up girls like this. They want nothing to do with him. Funny enough, the business card scene isn't nearly as big of a deal to Patrick in the novel as it is in the film. However, the other humiliations affect him much more, and linger with him throughout the book. For example, in the novel, he actually does take Jean to Dorsia. He doesn't have a reservation, of course, and tries to sneak into a table. He's caught, however, and very publicly forced to leave. A consequence of the fact that we don't see how the humiliations like this affect Bateman is a difference in motive. In the film, Bateman's murders are generally attributed as a violent rejection of the vapid and consumerist world around him. And while this is true to a certain extent in the novel, to me, it's much more apparent that Patrick's psychosis manifests itself when he isn't fitting into this world. For example, the scene where he takes Courtney to Barcadia. In the film, she's too stoned on Valium to notice, and the scene is played as very comical. However, in the novel, his date is aware that this isn't Dorsia, and she ignores him the whole time they are there. The scene is very awkward, and highlights Patrick's feelings of failure to get a reservation. When she eventually starts talking to him about her ex-boyfriend, obviously comparing Patrick negatively to him, his thoughts become erratic as he tries to stop himself from thinking about killing her. Conversely, when he goes to get a facial, his thoughts become calm as the masseuse praises his good looks. It shows that his mental state is dependent on how popular he is at that very moment. This also lends credibility to the theory that everything is happening in Patrick's head, and that he isn't actually killing anyone. That he's just imagining himself as this invincible killer to make himself feel better about being such a loser. There are several scenes that we know can't possibly be happening, such as the scene where he goes to a Bono concert and Bono tries to signal him from the stage. Yeah, there are a lot of celebrity references in the novel and the film. He worships Donald Trump, which is funny enough nowadays, but my favorite future coincidence is when one of the models literally calls him Batman.
I'm Batman.
Beyond just the fact that the camera is an objective view, another reason why the film presents the killings as reality is the style of the director Mary Harron. Harron has a history of feminist films, directing I Shot Andy Warhol, a film about feminist radical Valerie Solanas' attempted assassination of the said artist. She would also go on to direct the notorious Betty Page, another feminist icon. Harron brings a feminist perspective to the film that the novel doesn't get. In the scene where Bateman chases Christie through the apartment with a chainsaw, the POV shifts to her. As she runs, she briefly becomes the protagonist, and Bateman essentially becomes a monster from a slasher film. While this gives a lot more depth to Bateman's female victims, it also presents the events of the story as objectively happening. Another intentional change from Harron is the fact that we don't see most of Patrick's kills. In the movie scene where he confesses to his lawyer, he admits to killing his ex-girlfriend, some homeless people, a gay man, and many more off-screen. In the novel, he narrates each of those kills in detail, as he sadistically tortures his victims, sexually assaults them, and even engages in cannibalism. The film would obviously never be able to show all of that without probably being banned outright, but I think the fact that we don't see Bateman's worst deeds also makes him more likable in the film, which isn't a bad thing from a marketing perspective when you're trying to get people in seats, but it does lose some of the nuance from the novel. I'll admit though, the killings go on way too long in the book for me. I know people criticize the endless descriptions of people's clothes and food, but I actually don't mind those chapters. In fact, those descriptions are even funnier when you realize that the styles and dishes he's describing are actually intentionally tacky and disgusting, to highlight the fact that only opulence matters to these people, not actual substance. However, the pages upon pages of sex and torture actually start to get boring after a little while. One of the main criticisms the novel got, aside from the graphic nature, was the fact that it went on a little too long. It got to the point where when I encountered these scenes, I was tempted to skip ahead just to get back to the more interesting parts of the story, Patrick navigating his social circle. Speaking of which, one of the more interesting characters from the novel is Timothy Price, renamed Bryce for some reason in the movie. Price is the first character to speak in the novel, and he absolutely dominates the early chapters. Patrick also describes him as the most interesting person he knows, and he doesn't seem to mind the fact that he's having an affair with his fiancée in front of him. Like Patrick, Price seems to have a disdain for the yuppie world that they are a part of and the people in it. Unlike Patrick though, not only is Price vocal about this disdain, he actually does something about it. When they are at Tunnel, Price jumps down onto the tracks and runs away into the darkness. He's then missing from the rest of the novel. Occasionally characters ask where he is, and he's rumored to either be in rehab or the hospital. This scene was actually filmed for the movie, but it was cut for the final release. There's actually a little bit of dialogue in the final scene that no longer makes sense because of this.
Hey, look, Bryce is back and he's drinking mineral water. Yeah. He's a changed man, except we still can't get a reservation to save his life.
At the end of the novel, Price returns out of the blue. Patrick notices he has a smudge on his forehead, which some readers think is supposed to be a cross for Ash Wednesday. Price seems to have left the yuppie world to rediscover his spirituality. At the end of the novel and the film, he complains about Reagan's two-faced nature, which seems to show that he's developed something of a conscience. In this way, he's really the only character to grow. Now, I know I've talked a lot about what the novel does better, but the film, in my opinion, has a lot more entertainment value. Like I said, it's much more lighthearted, more of a black comedy than a snuff film. Plus, there's plenty of meme material in these lines, which after all is the ultimate purpose of any media. Which brings us back to the original question. Is the film better than the book? I won't say that the film is objectively better. After all, the novel offers much more nuance and interpretation than the movie does. However, from an entertainment perspective, I'd watch the movie over reading the book anytime. Not because it's easier, it's just more enjoyable for me personally than trudging through all the sex and murder scenes that leave me either sick or bored. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you all thought of either version, and let me know what other book and movie comparisons you'd like to see next. And hey, if you like films like this, you're gonna love the sponsor of this video, Mubi. Mubi is a curated streaming service, a place to watch incredible cinema from around the world. Every day, Mubi premieres a new hand-selected film. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover on the platform. It's like having your own personal film festival, streaming anytime, anywhere. One thing I really don't know enough about is international cinema, and that's something I'm trying to change. Luckily, Mubi has plenty of international films to watch. Right now I'm watching Ron by Akira Kurosawa. Not only does Mubi have information on the film and its amazing director, it also has commentary, articles, and even a place to share your own reviews. You can try Mubi for free for 30 days by going to mubi.com/purekino or by clicking on the link in the video description down below. Thanks again to Mubi for sponsoring this video. Very nice. Now let's see Nerdstalgic's video. Tommy Smith, Abdallah Alamari, Russell, Sean, Graham, Heart of Markness, Broccoli, Placenta Juan, Logan, Clean, John Reyna, Jesse Sterling, Andrew Stewart, Conchok Chofel, Ops Racing Media, Daz J Kid, Conan Higgins, Elizabeth Ellis, Irish Nachos, Sharose, Greg Penna, Stephen Lillard, Rex Lee, Virtua Fig, Sam Cedarland, Sandy Wren, Legendary Matt 93, and Don Lucania.